Uxbridge Remembrance Banner Program continues to see growing numbers. Dan Kearns, The Standard. Uxbridge. In its 9th year, the Uxbridge Honor Our Veterans Banner Program continues to grow. This year, the program has seen 272 war veteran banners placed on poles across the municipality. This is up from the total of 254 banners last year. We're happy with the community support, happy with the support of the township and the Legion in helping run it. We're pleased this year to have a digital map for our banner program, so it makes it easier for our sponsors to find where their banners are, Banner Committee Representative Tish McDonald told The Standard, adding, "Ultimately, I don't think there's a day which goes by when the banners are up we don't hear something positive, some positive story about the impact it's having." The program's website states, "This banner program is an ongoing legacy project which pays tribute to Canadian and Allied veterans and current services with banners, displayed between October 1st and November 12th. The inspiration for our Uxbridge Honor Our Veterans Banner program came after seeing a similar veteran recognition program in St. George, New Brunswick, and others in the New England states. With Uxbridge being a town proud of its military heritage and already having a strong tradition of remembrance, committee members were confident a banner program would be extremely well received, the website states. Ms. McDonald said, "This program has so much meaning for so many people. Our Second World War veterans who are still with us, who have banners, every year they're going out to see their banners, and they're thankful, and it just gives us the opportunity to say thanks to them." Since it was launched, the program has inspired the creation of similar banner programs in neighboring areas, such as Scugog Township. Herbert Brown was above the clouds and around the world in World War II. Darrell Knight, The Standard. Durham. With the world at war for nearly 4 years, by the time he celebrated his 18th birthday, Herbert Brown wasted little time and enlisted in the service just days later. He would bravely leave behind his childhood home in Chatham and a job in the advertising department at the Chatham Daily News, setting off on a journey which would take him to some of the farthest corners of the globe over the course of the following 3 years. "My brother Robert had also enlisted and spent time in Europe," said Mr. Brown. "When the time came, I performed my duty as well. We all supported the effort and wanted to do whatever we could." In August of 1943, Mr. Brown was transferred to the Royal Canadian Air Force, with his training taking place in Guelph, Toronto, and Calgary. With his prior experience in the newspaper business as an asset, Herbert Brown spent the remainder of 1943 and into 1944 training as a wireless operator. By August 1944, he had graduated training and received his commission. Consequently, he embarked on further training in bombing and gunnery before graduating as a pilot, also in August of 1944. He would then leave Canada, but before going to England, he spent time stationed in Nassau, Bahamas for operational training on bombers. Finally, in December of 1944, Mr. Brown was posted to the United Kingdom and left for England just before Christmas for his squadron assignment. After arriving in England just after New Year's Day 1945, he was posted to Southeast Asia in February. He made the arduous journey from Liverpool aboard the ship Mauretania, bound for Bombay, India, in March of 1945, then from there to Ceylon, now known as Sri Lanka. He arrived in Ceylon slightly before VJ Day in August of 1945, and while there he was part of a notable crew who set an endurance record for the region, flying more than 24 hours to a target north of Singapore. "We would routinely take part in patrols which lasted almost the entire day," added Mr. Brown. "But on that day, it wasn't so much intent as it was just trying to avoid bad weather." Throughout his time in Southeast Asia, Mr. Brown would log more than 400 hours of flying against the Japanese, mostly over occupied territory in Malaysia. After completing his tour, and with the Allied victory in Asia, Mr. Brown began making the globe-trotting trek in reverse. First, he traveled back to Bombay, then to England, before finally returning to Canada in February of 1946. Eventually, Mr. Brown would come to settle in Whitby, where he continues to live at the age of 96. KLPS seeking a nearly 10% budget increase for 2024. Dan Kearns, The Standard. Kawartha Lakes. The Kawartha Lakes Police Service, KLPS, is asking for a nearly 10% increase to its budget for 2024. At a special council meeting on Thursday, November 2nd, representatives from the police service presented a 9.82% increase request to Kawartha Lakes councilors as part of the 2024 municipal budget discussions. A 9.82% increase in the budget equals $918,043 being added to the police budget. Police Chief Mark Mitchell stated, the request is tied to a change to population growth projections for Kawartha Lakes. In 2021, the police force's consultant pegged population growth in the KLPS area to reach 33,449 people by 2040. However, 2023 projections now expect that number to grow to 47,445 by 2041. This is a preparation for the increased population growth which we know is coming to the city, Chief Mitchell said. The local police chief then told councillors the police service's salary and wage increases over the last 10 years have been below the provincial average. I recognize our ask is big, but I think we've been financially responsible when compared to the rest of the province, Chief Mitchell said. Ward 8 councillor Tracy Richardson acknowledged the KLPS is not the only police service facing budget pressures. The police services are all facing that same type of increase, she stated. Kawartha Lakes Treasurer Carolyn Daines pointed out the KLPS is an area-rated service in the budget, meaning only a portion of taxpayers have it on their bill. Kawartha Lakes Police Service and OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, have separate area rates. So, the residents of Lindsay and Ops pay for the Kawartha Lakes Police Service, and the residents of all other communities in Kawartha Lakes pay for the OPP.
Upgrades coming to the Uxbridge Public Library in December. Courtney McClure, The Standard, Uxbridge. The Uxbridge Public Library will be undergoing some changes in the adult department of the library, explained Amanda Ferraro. Ms. Ferraro is the Director of Community Services and the CEO of the Uxbridge Public Library. The shelves do need to be replaced. Some of them are missing the back, and they are kind of at their end of life. While the shelves are being replaced, the floor will also be replaced. A lot of thought went into making the shelving more accessible, said Ms. Ferraro. There will also be more space in the adult department, making it easier for people who use mobility aids to access the books they want to read. The renovations will start in early December. On December 3rd, the library will be fully closed. Then, the lower level will be open from December 10th until the 23rd. Between those dates, some books from the adult department will be available downstairs, but you must ask the library staff for them. The library will be closed again starting on December 24th, Christmas Eve, until January 3rd, 2024. According to Ms. Ferraro, the library will be reopened the next day on January 4th. The Witness of Scars. This week's issue is about Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, Indigenous Veterans Day, and all the other sacrifices we are indebted to, so our society may thrive and grow. This from the soil of beliefs our war veterans were defending when they went to war. What remains is, have we honored these sacrifices? If we have continued to live and even grow deeper in the values their actions were predicated on, then we have and are living in honor. If we as a society have departed from these values, worth dying to protect, then where is the honor? I'd like to examine the idea of scars. What is a scar? Isn't it a remembrance, a witness, the substance of a truth? Scars reveal a reality most of us don't comprehend, especially not on an intimate level, internally. If I may, I believe I can safely say no veteran would want us to carry around in our inner selves the scars they carry. Yet, despite the unthinkable circumstances in war, I believe they would each insist all life should be treated with value. How many times have you looked at someone, seen their scars, and then turned away, or wanted to? How many times have we felt secret shame when we've done this? Whenever I was confronted with the scars of others in the past, I had an aversion to the people who carried them. If they were war wounds, this confronted the inner sense I had of never doing my part, whether I could or I couldn't relate, making it seem I was not enough. I simply didn't know how to interact with these individuals. What if I asked a question which set them off or sent them into a recurring cycle of traumatic memories? Frankly, I was intimidated and afraid. Then, one day, I had a realization. How did they feel, going to war, protecting us, and the values which protect life? Who was I to allow this little bit of insecurity to override the depth of reality these brave people have lived, openly lived, to defend our lives? These heroes deserve time with us, but time which illustrates their sacrifices were not for nothing. Time which imparts back to them gratefulness, purpose, and security for the kind of future they gave of themselves to defend. Part of the disconnect is because we have never really experienced this kind of raw reality or have confronted the worst in the potential of mankind, certainly not on a mass scale. Only select individuals in our police force have experienced this kind of deprivation. There are also those in our medical system who have contended with the results of this kind of assault on the human senses, as they work tirelessly, confronting it in our emergency wings of hospitals everywhere. This is at a level which clearly reveals it is not just an individual thing, but rather a pervading and presenting influence which harasses the hearts and minds of humanity. We fight against it personally, yet it comes through in drips and drabs of impatience or anger, feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, and sometimes of resentment or even prejudice. These are scars as well, but they are ones which are not initially shown in the flesh, not evident physically. They are the wounds of the soul. Our veterans carry these inner scars exponentially as well, on top of, or should I say underneath, these physical witnesses. Yet many veterans have this solace too, as that is not all they have experienced. They have also experienced the noble potential of humankind. They may have surprised themselves and directly saved lives, or fought beside those who gave their lives to save others. So many, fighting to stop war by stopping the physical aggressor, have come home with physical and inner scars. This from wounds they incurred while valuing the lives of others. The Holy Bible says that is the highest thing another person can do. In John 15:13, the LITV version shares it this way: "Greater love than this has no one, that anyone should lay down his soul for his friends." Friends, those in our community, or larger in our country, whether we've met them or not. It is a disposition carried in the heart, with a preconception of good. You might even call it a positive prejudice. This characteristic is one we all like to imagine ourselves aspiring to, yet we believe we seldom have the opportunity to reach it in peacetime. In apparent peacetime, most of us are not willing to acknowledge we are still in a war, one which attempts to corrupt the spirit of humankind, crippled by the fall of man. We'd rather turn away to hide our shame than face the sense of inadequacy. It's understandable because we don't even know where the war is being waged. The war for our hearts goes on more subtly in the vacuum of direct physical war. It is the daily war of trying to rise up and live to protect the lives and dignity of others close by, and, consequently, at a larger level, our society. It's not an outward war, however. The victory starts by admitting we need the help of Christ, who has already fought that war, and will share his scars with us if we ask him. In this sharing, he also shares the victory won, the victory over that inner harassment. No amount of cheerleading, reflective abandonment, or incessant distractions of multimedia can avoid the needful acknowledgement of life's calling us to yield to the witness of scars. Christ's sacrifice to defend us provided us with an opportunity to live forward with that same seed of integrity. But we must look at it honestly and directly, remembering the corrupted heart of mankind from the fall in the garden, which provokes the wars we see the world going through today, right now, in Ukraine and the Middle East. In the Bible, it says, "Yet I will not forget you. Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands," in Isaiah 49:15b to 16a, in the ESV version. God has scars. Think of it. We are his scars, and they remind him of his love for us. This seed of laying one's life down for others, and so society, is offered to us today. Remember, we must acknowledge the gift, purpose, and security with gratefulness and live it forward in everyday moments. Christians hold this mission in heart. We treasure it because of the unending witness of Christ's scars. Scars serve as a piece of reality, evidence of truth fought for, and a danger fought against, but then defeated. In the judicial court system, throughout history, this is called evidence, but more than circumstantial or hearsay, it's an actual part of what existed in the fray. Christ's scars serve as a witness of the reality of the corruption of humankind. Yet more, they also serve as a testimony of a moment in time, of God's victory over this corruption, and how these scars offer direction for new life if we will take them to our hearts. Similarly, our veterans' scars direct us to look to them and learn of the value of life. Remembrance Day commemorates a needfulness to acknowledge the truth these heroes fought for, serves as a reminder to the spiritual war we live in today, and the good fight we can embrace to live as seeds of life. Happy seasoning.
Welcome to You've Got to Be Kidding, a podcast that offers a different perspective of life around us. Listen now to author Jonathan Van Bilsen.
I had the pleasure of photographing 28 vets along with their families at the annual dinner held at the Port Perry Legion branch. To say I was moved by the attendance was an understatement. The event made me think about one man in particular who, although he survived the war, which must have had an abysmal impact, that man was my father. Having been born and raised in the southern portion of the Netherlands, our town shares a border with Germany. Now that Europe, or most of it, is one nation, the border between the two countries is marked with a line on the sidewalk. In the 30s and 40s, however, it was quite different. I knew my father had been involved in the war, mostly with the Dutch resistance, but like so many from that era, he seldom ever spoke of those days. And I can only imagine some of the events he must have witnessed. In 2005, on one of my trips to Europe, I asked my father, who was 84 at the time, if he wanted to join me. I explained we could do a trek from the Netherlands to Dusseldorf, where he was interned during the war, and then to Berlin. He agreed, and off we went. After a few days with relatives, and there are many of them, we set out and drove to the city of Dusseldorf, about an hour away. En route, I asked him why he was there during the war, and he began to relay some of the facts of his life 60 years earlier. The Dutch did not have an army, and the Nazi invasion of the country took less than 5 days. The Netherlands had a vast underground system, and my father, along with my grandfather, played their part. Unfortunately, after a few months, my father was picked up by the German army, and he was taken to a camp in Dusseldorf. Although it was not a death camp, I'm sure it was no doubt a traumatic place. I recall him talking about the food, 90% of which consisted of sauerkraut, and how a boyhood friend of his, also in the same camp, complained once about dinner, and was never heard from again. Small tidbits of information began to trickle out, and I started to piece together the silent part of his life. As we neared Dusseldorf, I asked if he knew where the camp was. He looked at me as if I had two heads. Of course I remember, he said. I spent 2 years here. I explained how time had passed, but when we drove along a few streets, he saw the massive chimney of the camp still intact. I pulled up and spoke with a guard at the gatehouse and explained the history. He said we could go in. I thought it best to let my dad wander on his own, as he had grown very quiet. After 90 minutes or so, we continued on to Berlin. During the 6-hour drive, I began to learn more about his time in Germany. After nearly 2 years in the camp, he contracted diphtheria, a highly contagious and life-threatening illness. In an effort to avoid the spreading sickness, they sent him to a hospital in Cologne. After 2 weeks, he had vastly improved, and the intent was to send him back to the camp. He and his roommate decided they could escape from the hospital as it was not heavily guarded, and the Americans were pushing close to the German borders from the south. Stereotypically, they hid in a laundry truck and made their way into the town of Cologne. From there, they split up, and my dad, speaking fluent German, managed to make his way south into Belgium. He was nearing the Dutch border and encountered an American unit pushing forward to liberate the south of the Netherlands, which was part of the Ardennes, historically now known as the Battle of the Bulge. He was able to spend 3 days with the Americans and finally made it to safety at a farm owned by his great aunt. I remember him telling me he was 95 pounds when he made it to her house. She immediately fed him good farm food, and he was quite ill for a day or so. From there he walked home and was reunited with his family. He began courting my mother, and soon after the couple were married. I was captivated by the story and realized how fortunate I am to have missed those horrific times. I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen, and this is You've Got to Be Kidding.
You've Got to Be Kidding was presented by X4 Media with permission from the Standard Media Group. We endeavor to make all information contained in this program as accurate as possible at production time. X4 Media and the Standard Media Group are not responsible for any liabilities resulting from information contained in this program. For more information, please visit x4media.ca.
The Standard Podcast was produced by Greenstream Studio for the Standard newspaper.